What happens when the city's golden couple is a lie? Arthur Grayson was a Wall Street titan, a man who had everything, billions in assets, a penthouse overlooking Central Park, and a beautiful, pregnant wife, Emily. But behind the iron gates of their mansion, Arthur wasn't a philanthropist. He was a monster. One night, that monster went too far, and Emily lost everything. What Arthur Grayson forgot, what he couldn't possibly know, was that his wife's quiet, simple father, Mason, was not the man he pretended to be. This isn't just a story of domestic tragedy. It's the story of a father's promise and a cold, calculated revenge that would bring an entire empire crashing to the ground. The penthouse at 15 Central Park West was less a home and more a statement. It was a $70 million expanse of glass and Italian marble, floating above the city like a modern-day Olympus. This was the world of Arthur Grayson, and by extension, the gilded cage of his wife, Emily. Arthur was, by every metric, the man who had won. At 42, he was the CEO of Grayson Innovations, a powerhouse in tech and green energy. He was tall, with sharp blue eyes and a helmet of perfect dark hair. When he smiled for the cameras at the Met Gala or the Davos Summit, the city's financial journalists called him the new king. Emily Hayes, at 28, was the perfect accessory. She was softly beautiful, with kind eyes and a background in art history that she no longer used. She was now 4 months pregnant, a soft, hopeful swell under her bespoke gowns. She truly, desperately wanted to believe in the fairy tale. She loved Arthur, or at least she loved the man he presented to the world. The cracks, however, were not in the marble. They were in the quiet moments. "You're wearing the Cartier earrings tonight, Emily," Arthur said, one Tuesday evening. He didn't look up from his tablet, where stock tickers crawled across the screen. Emily, fastening a simple pearl necklace her father had given her, paused. "Oh, I thought these were more subtle. The Callaways' dinner is just—" "The Callaways are old money," Arthur cut in, his voice flat. "They respect display, not subtlety. The pearls make you look provincial. Wear the diamonds. We are the Graysons." Emily swallowed. Of course, the diamonds. This was the texture of their life. His control, her compliance. Her friends had slowly faded, replaced by the wives of his business associates. Her phone was a gift, and she knew he checked the call logs. He called it protecting our brand. She called it lonely. The only real link to her old life was her father, Mason Hayes. Mason visited once a month, driving down from his small, cluttered home in upstate New York. He was the antithesis of Arthur's world. A 60-year-old contractor, his hands were calloused, his flannel shirts were worn, and he looked at the penthouse with undisguised distaste. "This place feels like a bank vault," Mason said during his visit in September. He was sitting awkwardly on a $50,000 sofa, refusing to let the staff take his jacket. "Dad, please," Emily whispered, smiling weakly. "Arthur loves this view." "He loves owning the view, Emily. It's not the same thing." When Arthur entered the room, the temperature dropped. He smiled, all teeth, and shook his father-in-law's hand. "Mason, good to see you. The market's strong. I hope your contracting is going well." The subtle dig was always there. "You are small. I am large." Mason just nodded, his eyes flat and assessing. "It pays the bills. Emily, you look tired." "She's pregnant, Mason. She's supposed to be tired," Arthur said, with a light laugh, placing a heavy, possessive hand on Emily's shoulder. Mason's gaze flickered to that hand, then back to Arthur's eyes. He saw it, the thing Emily refused to see. Behind the billion-dollar charm, Arthur Grayson's eyes were utterly, terrifyingly empty. They were the eyes of a shark. Later, as Mason was leaving, He pulled Emily aside. "Lara," he said, using his childhood name for her. "My phone is always on. Day or night. The second you feel unsafe, you call. I'll be here in 2 hours." "Dad, I'm safe," Emily insisted, trying to laugh it off. "Arthur is just intense. He's under a lot of pressure." Mason looked at her, his heart breaking. "Pressure doesn't make a man cruel, Emily. It just reveals who he really is." He left his daughter in the glass tower, praying he was wrong. He wasn't. The pressure on Arthur Grayson was mounting. His flagship, Blackwood Green Energy Project, a massive solar initiative in the Nevada desert, was hitting regulatory hurdles. Investors were getting nervous. The project was, in fact, a hollow shell, a web of shell corporations designed to inflate the company's value. It was a house of cards, and Arthur was frantically trying to keep it from collapsing. His control at home tightened into a fist. It started small, an argument over dinner. Emily had, in his opinion, been too familiar with a waiter. "You think he didn't go back to the kitchen and laugh about you?" Arthur hissed, slamming the bedroom door. "He was just being friendly, Arthur. I was asking about the sauce." "You were flirting. You're my wife. You carry my son. You will not embarrass me." He backed her against the wall. She flinched. He saw the fear, and it seemed to feed him. He didn't hit her. He just punched the wall beside her head, the plaster cracking. "Don't ever do that again." Emily was terrified, but the next morning, the nightstand was covered in flowers. A new diamond bracelet was on her pillow. "I'm sorry, my love," he had whispered, kissing her. "The pressure, this Blackwood deal, it's making me crazy. It will never happen again." And Emily, pregnant and trapped, chose to believe him. It happened again a week later. He'd lost a key investor. He came home late, smelling of whiskey. He found Emily asleep in their bed. He tore the covers off her. "You're sleeping?" he roared. "I'm out there, bleeding, trying to keep this." He motioned to the apartment. "And you're sleeping? Arthur, you're drunk. Stop it, you're scaring me." He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in like talons. "I'll show you're scared." He slapped her. The sound was sharp, ugly. It echoed in the vast, silent room. Emily fell back, her hand flying to her cheek, tears of shock and pain stinging her eyes. Arthur froze. For a second he looked horrified. But it wasn't remorse. It was the cold realization of what he'd done. He began to gaslight her immediately. "You made me do that," he whispered, his voice dangerously soft. "You know how stressed I am. Why would you provoke me? Why would you accuse me of being drunk? You're supposed to support me." Emily's blood ran cold. He was twisting it, making it her fault. She fled to the guest room, locking the door, her hand trembling as she held her stomach. She thought about calling her father. But what would she say? "He hit me, but he's sorry?" She was too ashamed. The following Friday, it all came to an end. It was the night of the annual Metropolitan Charity Ball. Arthur was to be honored. But an hour before they were to leave, his phone rang. It was his COO. The Wall Street Journal was running a story. A whistleblower had leaked an internal memo about the Blackwood project. The word fraud was being used. Arthur hung up the phone. He was perfectly, terrifyingly calm. Emily was standing by the mirror, dressed in a shimmering silver gown, the diamonds her husband had demanded, she wear glittering at her throat. "Arthur, is everything okay?" she asked timidly. "Okay?" He turned. His face was a mask of cold fury. "Everything is ruined. My life's work. Ruined. We can fix it. You can fix anything. You." He advanced on her. "You're the leak." "What?" "No, Arthur, I would never. I don't even know anything about Blackwood. You've been talking to your father, the simple, stupid contractor. He's been digging, hasn't he? No, he hasn't. We just talk about the baby. Liar, he screamed. He grabbed her. She tried to pull away. Arthur, stop. The baby. You're hurting me. Her plea seemed to enrage him further. The baby. You always hide behind that. It's just another one of your manipulations. He shoved her. Hard. Emily, unbalanced in her heels, stumbled backward. She tripped on the thick pile rug, her arms windmilling. She fell, not against the bed, but against the sharp marble corner of the antique nightstand. She cried out, a sound of pure agony. She felt a blinding, tearing pain in her abdomen. Arthur stared. He looked at her on the floor, the silver dress, the way she was clutching her stomach. Emily looked down. A dark, crimson stain was spreading rapidly across the silver fabric. The baby, she whispered, her eyes wide with terror. Arthur, help me. Call 911. Arthur Grayson didn't move. He looked at his wife, at the blood, and his first thought was not of her, or his child. It was of the scandal, of the police, of the Wall Street Journal. He walked to his desk, picked up his phone, and dialed a number. But it wasn't 911. Dr. Finch, he said, his voice like ice. I have a situation at my penthouse. It's a domestic emergency, no sirens. And bring your full kit. It's a mess. Emily didn't wake up in a hospital. There were no bright lights, no bustling nurses, no reassuring beep of a heart monitor. She awoke to the smell of antiseptic and old linen. She was in a small, private room, the walls a dull beige. A single barred window looked out onto a brick wall. A quiet, older woman in a starched white uniform was checking an IV drip in her arm. Where am I? Emily's voice was a dry rasp. Her body was a universe of pain. You're at the Finch Clinic, in Westchester, the nurse said, her voice devoid of emotion. Dr. Finch is on his way. The Finch Clinic. Emily had heard the name. It was a discreet, incredibly expensive wellness center where celebrities and billionaires went to dry out or recover from exhaustion away from the press. Dr. Alistair Finch entered. He was a thin, severe man with watery grey eyes behind thick glasses. He carried a tablet. Mrs. Grayson, you're awake. Good. My baby, Emily said, her hand flying to her stomach. The swell was gone. My baby. Is he? Dr. Finch adjusted his glasses. He did not sit. He did not offer a hand. There were severe complications, Mrs. Grayson. A significant placental abruption caused by your fall. He emphasized the word fall slightly. We had to perform an emergency D&C to save your life. The fetus was not viable. I'm very sorry, the pregnancy was lost. The words. Complications. Fall. Fetus. Lost. It was a void. A cold, black, screaming void opened up inside Emily. The baby, the only good thing in this suffocating life, the only thing she had loved without reservation, was gone. No, she whispered. No. Your husband is on his way. He's been terribly worried. At that moment, Arthur walked in. He was wearing a fresh suit. He looked pale, but not grieving. He looked inconvenienced. He rushed to her bedside, the picture of the concerned husband. Emily, my darling, he said, loud enough for the doctor to hear. Thank God you're all right. It was a terrible accident. You tripped. I tried to catch you. It all happened so fast. He tried to take her hand. Emily snatched it back. She stared at him, the man who had called his private fixer instead of an ambulance, the man who had watched her bleed. You, she choked out. You did this. Emily, you're in shock, Arthur said smoothly, turning to the doctor. She's hysterical. That's normal, Dr. Finch said, making a note. A mild sedative is in her IV. She should rest. But before the drugs could pull her under, the door to the room burst open. It was Mason Hayes. He looked like a thundercloud. His flannel jacket was rumpled from a frantic drive, his face grey with panic. He'd been calling Emily for 12 hours, ever since he saw the Wall Street Journal alert about Grayson. Her phone just rang and rang. Finally, he'd driven to the penthouse, only for the doorman to say Mrs. Grayson wasn't there. He'd threatened to call the police, and the doorman, intimidated, finally gave him the name of the clinic. He saw his daughter, pale and broken in the bed. He saw the IV. He saw the dead look in her eyes. Then he saw Arthur Grayson. "Get away from her," Mason growled. "Mason, this is a private matter," Arthur said, standing up. "Emily had an accident." "Accident?" Mason looked at Emily. He saw the faint, yellowing bruise on her cheek from the slap she'd tried to cover with makeup. He saw the terror in her eyes. "Dad," Emily whispered, and that's all it took. She broke, a keening, animal sound of pure grief. "Dad, he hit me. He killed the baby. He killed my baby." The world stopped. Dr. Finch stiffened. Arthur's face went white with fury. "She's hysterical. She's on medication." Mason Hayes turned to Arthur. The change that came over him was terrifying. The simple, worried contractor vanished. His posture straightened. His eyes, which had been kind and worried, became 2 chips of ice. It was a look of absolute, surgical cold. He didn't yell. He didn't raise his voice. He spoke in a low, precise whisper that cut through the room. "You," he said, pointing a calloused finger at Arthur. "You just made the last mistake of your life." "You can't threaten me, old man," Arthur sneered, regaining his composure. "I own this city. I'll have you arrested for trespassing." "I'm not threatening you," Mason said, his voice flat. He turned to Emily and ripped the IV from her arm. "We're leaving." "She's not medically cleared," Dr. Finch protested. Mason picked up Emily's chart. He glanced at the medication list. "She's cleared. You're just holding her." He bundled Emily, as if she weighed nothing, into his arms. At the door, he looked back at Arthur. "You're going to lose everything, Grayson. Your money, your name, your freedom. You're going to live a long, long time. And every single day, you're going to wake up in a cage, knowing I'm the man who put you there." He walked out, carrying his broken daughter, leaving the billionaire and his pet doctor in the sterile, silent room. The war had begun. Mason drove for an hour, not to his home, but to a nondescript residence inn off the highway. He got Emily into a suite, his movements gentle but efficient. He called a private physician he trusted, an old army buddy, who came, examined Emily, and treated her for dehydration and minor contusions. He left painkillers and a warning to watch for infection. Once Emily was asleep, Mason Hayes sat in the dim light of the hotel room, and he became a different man. He opened his battered contractor's laptop. It booted not to Windows, but to a hardened, encrypted version of Linux. He pulled out a satellite-based modem. Mason Hayes was not a contractor. Not really. 25 years ago, he had been Major Mason Hayes, U.S. Army Special Operations. After that, he'd been recruited into a little-known branch of the Treasury Department, Forensic Investigations. He hunted warlords, cartels, and rogue states by following their money. He was a financial ghost, a man who could dismantle an empire with a keystroke. He retired when his wife got sick, wanting a quiet life for Emily. He'd built houses to keep his hands busy. But he never lost his skills. He never lost his contacts. And he had a rainy day fund that would make Arthur Grayson's eyes water. He made 2 calls. The first was to Sully, a man named Michael Sullivan, who had been his lead investigator. Sully now ran a high-end corporate security firm in Washington, D.C., that was, in reality, a private intelligence agency. Mason, it's been a long time. You're supposed to be fishing. I've got a target, Sully. Personal. That's not like you. He put my daughter in the hospital. He killed my grandchild. There was a dead silence on the line. Who? Sully's voice was now hard. A New York billionaire, Arthur Grayson. Grayson Innovations. The green energy guy? He's a blue chip. Untouchable. Nobody is untouchable, Mason said. I want his full financial workup. I want to know where every dollar is, where it came from, and where it's going. I want his personal life. I want to know every mistress, every secret, every vice. I want his soul. That's a full-spectrum attack, Mason. It's expensive. The money is in the Geneva account. Standard transfer. I want you to find a girl. Name's Sarah Jenkins. She was Arthur's executive assistant about 2 years ago. She signed an NDA and disappeared. Find out why. Got it, Sully said. Give me 72 hours. The second call was to a woman in her late 20s, known only as Echo. She was a white hat hacker who had once been black hat until Mason caught her and gave her a choice, prison or work for him. Echo, I need you to go dark. Hey boss, what's the target? Arthur Grayson, Grayson Innovations. I want his servers. I want his personal email. I want his phone. I want his bank. I want his doctor's office. A man named Alistair Finch. Finch Clinic, Westchester. I want to know what they said to each other. Grayson? Oof. He's got state-of-the-art security. Which is why I'm calling you, Mason said. It'll be fun, Echo chirped. I'll send you the bill. For 2 days, Mason sat with Emily. He let her grieve. He listened as she poured out the whole story. The slaps, the control, the gaslighting, the shame. He just listened, his rage solidifying into a cold, hard plan. On the 3rd day, the first encrypted packet arrived from Sully. You were right, Mason. Grayson isn't blue chip. He's a house of cards. The file opened. The Blackwood project was exactly what Mason suspected. A massive fraud. Grayson was using fake engineering reports to pump the stock, planning to dump his shares before the company collapsed. He'd conned hundreds of investors, including the city's pension fund. And Sarah Jenkins? Mason asked. Found her. She's a waitress in Arizona. Grayson paid her $1.5 million she signed the NDA. Sully's team is on a plane to see her now. Then, Echo's file came in. It was a recording. It was the call Arthur made from the penthouse as Emily was bleeding on the floor. Arthur's voice. Dr. Finch, I have a situation, a domestic emergency, no sirens. Finch's voice. Is she... Arthur's voice. She's bleeding. The baby's gone, I'm sure of it. This could ruin me. The journal story is breaking. This cannot get out. I need you to clean this up. The accident protocol. Finch's voice. It will cost you, Arthur. The protocol is expensive. Arthur's voice. Just do it, and make sure she doesn't talk. Mason closed his laptop. The accident protocol. The sedative. This wasn't just abuse. It was conspiracy. It was attempted murder. Okay, Mason said to the empty room. Phase 1. He wasn't going to the cops. Not yet. A man like Grayson had judges on his payroll. He was going to the money. Mason Hayes knew that to kill a monster like Grayson, you couldn't just attack the man. You had to attack his god, and Arthur Grayson's god was his reputation. He took Echo's data and Sully's financial analysis. The Blackwood fraud was airtight. The fake reports, the shell corporations diverting funds to a Cayman Islands account, the trail was all there. Mason didn't leak it to the press. That would be too messy, too slow. He identified the single biggest investor in the Blackwood project, a man Grayson had personally conned, Joel Vance. Joel Vance was old money royalty, a rival billionaire who despised new money usurpers like Arthur. He was ruthless, powerful, and most importantly, he hated being made a fool of. From an anonymous encrypted email address, Mason sent a single file to Joel Vance's private server. It contained 3 things. 1. The unadulterated engineering report showing Blackwood was vaporware. 2. The Cayman Islands account number. 3. A simple message. He thinks you're a fool. It took less than 6 hours. Joel Vance, incandescent with rage, didn't call the SEC. He called his brokers. He initiated a massive, coordinated dump of all his Grayson Innovation stock. And he made one phone call to the Wall Street Journal reporter who had the initial whistleblower story. "I'm going on record," Vance said. "The Blackwood project is a complete fabrication. Grayson is a con artist. Quote me." The next morning, the market opened to a bloodbath. The Journal headline was catastrophic. Titan falls. Julian Vance accuses Grayson of massive fraud. Dumps stock. Grayson Innovation stock, the source of Arthur's entire $10 billion fortune, collapsed. It fell 40% in the first 10 minutes. It triggered automatic halts. Arthur was on his trading floor, screaming into his phone. He was losing hundreds of millions of dollars a minute. He was being margin called by every bank on the street. He was being wiped out. At the same time, Sully's team in Arizona had found Sarah Jenkins. She was a terrified young woman, haunted by what had happened. He didn't just hit me," she confessed to Sully's female investigator. I was pregnant too. Just a few weeks. He pushed me down the stairs at his Hamptons house. He said it was an accident. And then Dr. Finch came. It was the same pattern, the same doctor, the same cover-up. Sully's investigator put a contract on the table. "Our client is prepared to offer you $3 million, relocation, and 24/7 security. All you have to do is break your NDA and tell your story to 2 people, the New York Times and the district attorney." Sarah, seeing a way out, finally agreed. Back in New York, Arthur was in his war room, trying to stop the financial bleeding. He was selling assets, leveraging everything. He was trying to call Joel Vance, who refused to take his call. He was screaming at his lawyers. He had no idea this was just the beginning. In the hotel, Emily was watching the financial news, stunned. "Dad, is this you?" Mason just sipped his coffee. "He's distracted, Emily. His money is on fire. Now, we go after his name." He looked at his daughter, his eyes softening. "But this part is up to you. Are you ready to fight?" Emily looked at the image of her husband on the TV, his face a mask of fury. She thought of the baby she would never hold. Her grief hardened into resolve. "Yes," she said. "I'm ready. I want him to see my face when it all burns down." The annual Orchid Ball was the absolute pinnacle of New York society. It was the event, more exclusive than the Met Gala, held in the grand ballroom of the New York Public Library. It was Arthur Grayson's favorite night. This year, he was being honored with the Humanitarian of the Year award. After the Wall Street Journal disaster, his PR team had begged him not to go. "It looks weak if I hide," Arthur had snarled. "I will go. I will give my speech, and I will remind these vultures who I am." He was financially crippled, but he still had his name. He still had his social standing. He would weather this storm, liquidate the fraud, and rebuild. He arrived at the library, walking up the marble steps, forcing a smile for the few Page 6 photographers still willing to snap his picture. He felt the chill. People were whispering. His rivals were looking at him with pity, which was worse than hatred. He entered the ballroom. The polite applause was thin. He took his seat at the head table. The evening began. The soup was served. The mayor spoke. Then, just before the main course, the massive oak doors of the ballroom opened. Every head turned. It was Emily. She was not in a victim's gown. She was wearing a perfectly tailored, razor-sharp black suit. Her hair was pulled back. Her face was pale but strong. She looked like a general. At her side was Gloria Allred, the most famous and feared victims' rights attorney in the country. Behind them walked two plainclothes NYPD detectives. The ballroom fell into a silence so profound you could hear the ice melting in the water glasses. Arthur Grayson froze. Emily and her team did not walk to the table. They walked directly onto the stage, to the podium. Emily tapped the microphone. The small thump echoed like a gunshot. "Good evening," Emily's voice, clear and cold, filled the room. "My apologies for the interruption. I know you're here to honor my husband, Arthur Grayson, as Humanitarian of the Year." She let that hang in the air. "I am Emily Hayes, and 2 weeks ago, this humanitarian beat me so severely that he killed our unborn child." A collective, horrified gasp rippled through the crowd. Phones were instantly, frantically recording. Arthur shot to his feet. "Lies! She's hysterical. She's mentally unstable." "Am I?" Emily's voice cut him off. "Or was I unstable 2 days ago, when the New York Times posted the story of Sarah Jenkins, your former assistant, who you also accidentally pushed down a flight of stairs when she became pregnant?" Arthur's face went sheet white. He hadn't seen it. The story had broken online minutes ago. The two detectives stepped forward. "Arthur Grayson," one said, his voice booming, "you are under arrest for the assault of Sarah Jenkins." "You can't!" Arthur shrieked as they grabbed his arms. "This is my event." "Mr. Grayson," Gloria Allred said, her voice dripping with ice, "you'll find the warrant is quite valid." As they cuffed him, Emily looked at her husband. "The charges for what you did to me," she said, just loud enough for him to hear, "are being filed in the morning. This is for the social part." The flashbulbs were blinding. Arthur Grayson, the new king of New York, was dragged out of the Orchid Ball in handcuffs, his carefully constructed world dissolving in a chorus of camera shutters. Emily stood on the stage, trembling but upright. She had taken back her name. In the hotel, Mason watched the live feed from a donor's phone. He saw his daughter's strength. He closed his laptop. "Phase 2, he whispered. "Complete. Now, for the kill shot." Arthur Grayson was in hell. He was in a holding cell at Rikers Island. His arrest at the ball, a story that was now on every news channel on Earth, had made him toxic. No one would bail him out. His assets were frozen. His lawyers were demanding retainers he couldn't pay, but he was a cornered rat and still dangerous. He had one card left, a private disaster account in Switzerland, untouched by the Blackwood collapse, containing $50 million. It was his escape hatch. He finally got his one phone call. He didn't call a lawyer. He called his private pilot. "Get the Gulfstream ready. Teterboro. Midnight. File a flight plan for Zurich." He hung up. He met with a public defender he sneered at. The judge, seeing the media circus, had set bail at a mere $5 million. Arthur knew that as soon as he was processed, one of his last loyal fixers would arrive with a cashier's check. He would be out by 10 p.m. He would be on a plane by midnight. He would disappear. What Arthur didn't know was that Echo was still listening. She had flagged the call to Teterboro. "Boss!" she pinged Mason. "The rat is fleeing the nest. Teterboro. Midnight." "He won't make it," Mason replied. Mason had been saving his final, and most shocking, piece of revenge. He hadn't just been focused on the money or the abuse. He had been focused on Dr. Alistair Finch. Sully's team had done a deep dive on the Finch clinic, and what they found was worse than anyone could have imagined. The clinic wasn't just a cover-up facility. It was a front. Dr. Finch, using his access to wealthy, vulnerable patients, was running an illegal, unlicensed genetic research lab. He was harvesting eggs, sperm, and even embryonic tissue from his sedated patients like Emily and Sarah. He was selling this genetic material to international clients on the black market for experimental therapies. And Arthur Grayson wasn't just a client. He was the primary investor. The Blackwood fraud was just one of his schemes. The clinic was his pet project. Mason Hayes picked up his phone. He didn't call the NYPD. He didn't call the DA. He called the one man he knew he could trust, the deputy director of the FBI. Director Jensen, it's Mason Hayes. The director's voice was sharp. Hayes, I thought you were dead. Not yet. I'm sending you a file. It's a RICO case on a silver platter. Human trafficking, illegal medical research, wire fraud, conspiracy. Your target is Dr. Alistair Finch and his partner, Arthur Grayson. At 10:30 p.m., Arthur Grayson, his face hidden under a hoodie, walked out of Rikers. His fixer's check had cleared. He got into a black Suburban and sped toward the Titerboro Airport in New Jersey. At 11:15 p.m., a dozen black FBI vans, sirens silent, stormed the Finch Clinic in Westchester. They caught Dr. Finch trying to incinerate his files. At 11:45 p.m., Arthur's Suburban pulled onto the tarmac. His Gulfstream G650 was waiting, engines whining. He ran up the steps. "Go! Go!" he yelled at the pilot. Just as the plane door was about to close, the tarmac was flooded with red and blue lights. FBI vehicles surrounded the jet. "This is the FBI. Shut down the engines. Everyone off the plane. Now!" Arthur's face crumpled. It was over. The final confrontation didn't happen in a courthouse. It happened in a sterile, gray interrogation room at 26 Federal Plaza. Arthur was in an orange jumpsuit, his multi-$1,000 suit gone. He was just a man, small, tired, and consumed by hate. The door opened. In walked the U.S. attorney, and behind him, Mason Hayes. "You!" Arthur lunged, but the chains on his ankles held him. "You did this! The contractor! The simple, stupid builder!" "How?" Mason walked up to the table and leaned in. His voice was quiet. "You were right about one thing, Arthur. I am a builder. I build houses. They stand on rock, on solid foundations." He leaned closer. "You build your life on lies, on paper, on the pain of others. It's a house of cards. All I had to do," Mason whispered, "was pull one. The right one. You ruined me. You ruined yourself," Mason said, his voice hard. "You took my daughter's child. You broke her. You thought you were a king. But you're just a bully. And bullies only understand one thing." What's going to happen?" Arthur whispered, the reality finally setting in. "The financial fraud? You'd do 10 years. The assault charges, maybe 15 with good behavior," Mason said. "But the clinic? Dr. Finch is telling them everything right now to save his own skin. Human trafficking, illegal genetic experimentation, RICO. You're never getting out. You're going to die in a federal prison." Mason turned and walked to the door. "But like I promised," he said, looking back one last time, "you're going to live. A nice, long time. And every morning, when you wake up in that 8-by-10 cell, you'll remember Emily's face. And you'll remember mine." He walked out, leaving Arthur Grayson alone in the silence, a king with no kingdom, a man with no future. Arthur Grayson was in hell. He was no longer in a glass penthouse overlooking Central Park. He was in a 10x12 concrete box in the Rikers Island Processing Center, a place that smelled of industrial bleach, cold sweat, and human despair. The thin mattress was stained. The steel toilet was bolted to the floor, a constant, gleaming monument to his humiliation. He had been stripped, searched, and deloused. He, Arthur Grayson, had been treated like common refuse. His arrest at the Orchid Ball was now the single most watched video clip on the planet. The New York Post cover was simply his face, contorted in a silent scream, with the headline, "Goodbye, Grayson." He was toxic. Every friend he had ever bought, every politician he had ever funded, had scattered. His calls went unanswered. The board of Grayson Innovations had convened an emergency meeting and ousted him in a 20-minute vote. The financial fraud charges, combined with the public nature of his arrest for the assault on Sarah Jenkins, had made him radioactive. But a cornered rat is not a dead rat. It's a more vicious one. He sat in the orange jumpsuit, his mind working with a cold, frantic clarity. He had one card left, one final untouchable escape hatch, a private, non-declaratory disaster account in Zurich, Switzerland. It was seeded with $50 million in bearer bonds and gold certificates, completely disconnected from his public empire. It was the account he'd set up for a day just like this. He had a brief, humiliating video conference with a judge. The DA argued he was a flight risk. His overworked, unimpressed public defender argued that his assets were frozen. The judge, eager to wash his hands of the media circus, set bail at an astronomical $5 million. But it was still, to Arthur's mind, a mere sum. His fixer, a silent, severe man named Mr. Thorne, had been activated. Thorne was the only man on his payroll paid in cash for this exact contingency. He would arrive with the $5 million in cashier's checks. At 7 p.m., Arthur was allowed his one phone call. He didn't call a lawyer. He called a satellite number. Teterboro. Midnight. The G6550, he said, his voice a low rasp. Mr. Grayson, the FAA, there are complications. The pilot's nervous voice came back. You are paid $800,000 a year, Derek, Arthur hissed. You will file a flight plan for Zurich. You will cite a medical emergency, and you will have the engines on when I arrive. Or I will find you, and I will destroy your life. He slammed the phone down. He would be out by 10 p.m. He would be on the plane by midnight. By sunrise, he would be over the Atlantic, a ghost. From Switzerland, he would orchestrate his revenge. He would burn Emily to the ground. He would find that old man, Mason, and have him buried in one of his own foundations. This was not an end. It was an intermission. He had no idea that his world had already ended. He just hadn't received the memo. In the Residence Inn, Mason Hayes was watching the news report of Arthur's bail hearing. Emily was in the next room, finally, fitfully asleep. His encrypted phone buzzed. It was Echo. "Boss!" Her voice was crisp, all business. "The rat is moving. He just called his pilot, Teterboro, midnight, filing a bogus plan for Zurich." "He won't make it," Mason said, his voice flat. "Are we leaking it? Call the DA?" "No," Mason said. "The DA has him on assault. A good lawyer gets him 10 years. He's out in 5. I'm not giving him 5. "So what's the play?" Echo asked. "The play," Mason said, "is already in motion. I'm taking him off the board, permanently." He hung up and dialed Michael Sullivan. "Sully, are you in position?" "We are," Sully's voice came from Washington, D.C. "Mason, what we found. Are you sure about this? This is next level." Mason looked at the wall, his thoughts on Emily. "He put his hands on my daughter, Sully. He took my grandchild. He thought he was a god. It's time to show him what happens when gods fall." Mason had saved his final, most devastating piece of revenge. Sully's team, digging into Dr. Alistair Finch hadn't just found a simple cover-up artist. The Finch Clinic was a front. It was a front for something so monstrous it made the Blackwood fraud look like petty theft. Dr. Finch, using his access to the sedated, vulnerable and wealthy, was running an illegal, unlicensed human genetics lab. He was harvesting eggs from female patients. He was harvesting sperm from male patients. He was creating and cryogenically freezing embryos. He was selling this pure genetic material from what he called premium stock to the highest bidders on the international black market, shadowy biotech firms, rogue states, and desperate billionaires seeking experimental therapies. Emily Hayes had not just been a patient. She had been a harvest. So had Sarah Jenkins. And Arthur Grayson. He wasn't just a client. He was the primary investor, the partner. The clinic was his pet project, his dark, secret God complex. Mason Hayes picked up his phone and made his final call. He used a number he hadn't dialed in 15 years. Director Jensen's office. "This is Mason Hayes. Tell him Pathfinder is on the line." There was a click. A new, sharper voice came on. "Hayes, I thought you were dead." "Not yet, Davies. I'm sending a file to your private server. Right now, it's a RICO case wrapped in a bow. It's human trafficking, illegal medical research, wire fraud, conspiracy. It's a horror show. Your target is a Dr. Alistair Finch in Westchester, and his partner, Arthur Grayson. Grayson, the guy who just got arrested. The DA has him." "The DA has him for battery," Mason said, his voice cold. "I'm giving you the case that puts him in a supermax for the rest of his natural life. But you have to move now. Grayson made bail. He's fleeing the country. Teterboro. Midnight." There was a sharp intake of breath. "I've got the file, dear God. I'm scrambling the hostage rescue team and the New York field office. We'll take the clinic and the airport simultaneously. Hayes, thank you. Just get him, Davies," Mason said. "Get the monster." At 11:15 p.m., as Arthur's fixer was signing the last of the bail paperwork, a dozen black-on-black FBI vans, sirens silent, rolled up the long, dark driveway of the Finch Clinic. "Breach! Breach! Breach!" Agents stormed the sterile, quiet building. Dr. Alistair Finch was in his private office, frantically feeding files into an incinerator. He was pulled to the ground, screaming. A second team breached the sub-basement. What they found made hardened agents physically sick. The gleaming white laboratory, the rows of cryogenic freezers, the labeled, catalogued samples. "Director," the team lead said into his radio, his voice strained. "We have it. It's all here. It's a factory. We have files, patients, Emily Hayes, Sarah Jenkins. God, there are dozens." At 11:45 p.m., a black Suburban with tinted windows sped across the tarmac at Teterboro. The rain was lashing down, a cold, violent autumn storm. Arthur Grayson, back in his $5,000 Brioni suit, stared out the window. There it was. The Gulfstream G650, engines whining, its lights cutting through the darkness. A beautiful $70 million symbol of his escape. He felt a surge of pure, ecstatic triumph. He had won. The Suburban stopped. Mr. Thorne opened the door. Arthur ran through the rain, up the steps of the jet. The pilot, Derek, was pale. "Sir, we have to go now." "Go! Go!" Arthur screamed, just as the flight attendant was sealing the heavy door. Whump, 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 whump. The sound was deafening, vibrating in his chest. A Black Hawk helicopter, its searchlight blinding, descended from the storm, positioning itself directly in front of the jet. Simultaneously, the tarmac flooded. From every hangar, it seemed, FBI vehicles, sirens, and takedown lights erupted, forming an iron ring around the plane. A voice, amplified by a bullhorn, shattered the night. This is the FBI. Shut down the engines. You are surrounded. Everyone off the plane with your hands in the air, now!" The pilot immediately cut the engines, his hands shooting up. Arthur Grayson stared out the small oval window. He saw the red and blue lights reflecting off the wet pavement. He saw the SWAT teams, black-clad, weapons raised. He saw the helicopter. He saw the end. His face, which seconds before had been triumphant, crumpled. It wasn't just defeat. It was annihilation. The final confrontation didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened 2 days later in a sterile, grey, windowless interrogation room at 26 Federal Plaza. Arthur was in an orange jumpsuit again. He was shackled to a bolt in the floor. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed, trembling rage. He was no longer a king, no longer a man. He was just a federal prisoner. The door opened. In walked the U.S. attorney, a sharp woman in a dark blue suit. "Mr. Grayson," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion, "the state charges of assault are the least of your problems. The federal government is charging you with 44 counts, including conspiracy to commit human trafficking, illegal medical experimentation, and racketeering. Dr. Finch has given a full confession. He has implicated you as the founder and primary beneficiary. He's trading your life for his." "Lies! It's all lies!" Arthur shrieked, his voice cracking. "I was framed. It was him." The U.S. attorney just stared at him. "You are facing 3 consecutive life sentences, Mr. Grayson. There will be no bail." She nodded to the door. "He has been given 5 minutes, at his own request." She left. The door opened again. Mason Hayes walked in. He was wearing his simple flannel shirt and work jeans. He looked, as always, like a contractor. Arthur's body went rigid. A low, animal sound gurgled in his throat. "You!" he screamed, lunging forward, the chain snapping him back so hard he fell off his chair. You nothing. A handyman. A carpenter. You did this. You ruined me. I'll kill you. I'll kill your daughter. Do you hear me? I will kill you." Mason calmly righted the chair and sat down opposite him. He leaned forward. "You were right about one thing, Arthur. I am a builder." His voice was a soft, cold whisper, more terrifying than Arthur's screams. "I build houses. They stand on rock, on concrete, solid foundations. I spent my whole life looking at blueprints, not just for houses, for men, for their organizations. I looked at your blueprint, Arthur." "What? What are you talking about?" Arthur panted, his eyes wide with madness. "Your blueprint was rotten. The Blackwood fraud. That was just a crack in the wall. Sloppy, arrogant. I knew there had to be more. So I looked at your foundation. Your real one. The one you built with Dr. Finch." Arthur's face went chalk white. The screaming stopped. "You thought you were a god, didn't you?" Mason continued, "playing with life, stealing, harvesting from women who were unconscious, from my daughter, while she was bleeding out, while she was losing her baby. It was Finch. I just invested—" "Stop," Mason said. The word was not a request. It was a command. "It's over. The FBI found your signature on the partnership agreements. They found the transfer logs from your Swiss account to the black market buyers. They found Emily's file, the samples. They found everything." Arthur Grayson broke. The last of his ego, his rage, his fire evaporated. He slumped, a hollowed-out shell in an orange jumpsuit. He began to weep, thin, pathetic, silent tears. What's going to happen to me?" he whispered. Mason stood up. "The financial fraud? You'd do 10 years. The assault charges? Maybe 15 with a good lawyer," Mason said, walking to the door. "But this, the RICO charges, the human trafficking? You're never getting out. You're going to die in a supermax prison." A concrete box. He paused, his hand on the door. He looked back at the broken billionaire. But like I promised, you're going to live a nice, long time. And every morning, when you wake up in that box, you're not going to think about your money or your penthouse or your jet. You're going to think about Emily's face, and you're going to remember mine. Mason opened the door and walked out into the hallway, not looking back. He left Arthur Grayson alone in the silence, buried alive in the foundation of his own evil. The story of Arthur and Emily Grayson is a brutal reminder that the most pristine facades can hide the darkest secrets. But it's also a story of incredible strength and the unstoppable power of a father's love. It shows that no one, no matter how rich or powerful, is untouchable. Justice can and will find a way. If you were moved by this story, and if you believe in the fight for justice, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. These stories need to be told. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We have so many more real-life dramas to share with you. Thank you for listening.